Arousal, stress, anxiety, and factors affecting performance. Arousal. Adams et al. Stated in 2010 that arousal is the state of alertness and anticipation that prepares the body for action. It involves both physical activation and psychological activity. Arousal is viewed along a continuum, with a deep sleep at one extreme and excitement at the other. And individuals who are optimally aroused are mentally and physically activated to perform. The relationship between arousal and performance is demonstrated through these following theories: drive theory, the inverted U theory, and catastrophe theory. Drive theory. The drive theory view is of the relationship between arousal and performance is linear. This means that arousal increases, so does performance. The more learned a skill through practice is, the more likely it is that a higher level of arousal will result in a better performance. Also, a novice learner would struggle under high levels of pressure, whereas the autonomous learner copes better with higher levels of arousal. For example, when juggling, the performer did worse without any external arousal, whereas when there was, they performed better. However, there is little research to support this theory, as there is evidence suggests that athletic performance is benefited by arousal only up to a point, after which the athlete becomes too aroused and their performance decreases. This argument is put forward through the inverted U theory. The inverted U theory. This states that at optimal arousal levels, performance levels will be at their highest. But when arousal is too low or too high, performance levels will be lower. It argues that lower levels of arousal performance will not be as high as it should because the athlete is neither physiologically or psychologically ready. As arousal levels increase, so does the performance, but only up to an optimal point. At this optimal point of arousal, the athlete's performance will be at its highest. After this optimal point, performance levels start to decrease gradually. The inverted U theory is more widely accepted than drive theory because most athletes and coaches can report personal experience under arousal, over arousal, and optimal arousal. However, there are questions over the type of curve demonstrated. Does it give an optimal point, or do some athletes experience optimal arousal for longer periods of time? Also, the shape of the graph is an incorrect speed of change, as it shows gradual change, whereas it might be quick or possibly last longer. Catastrophe theory. The catastrophe theory says performance is affected by arousal in an inverted U fashion only when the individual has low levels of cognitive anxiety. If the athlete is experiencing high levels of cognitive anxiety and arousal levels increase up to the athlete's threshold, the player experiences a dramatic drop in performance levels. The key difference between catastrophe theory and the inverted U theory is that the drop in performance does not have to be a steady decline when arousal becomes too high. Catastrophe theory does not argue that cognitive anxiety is completely negative. The theory suggests that you perform at a higher level if you have a degree of cognitive anxiety because your attention and concentration levels increase. It is only when levels of cognitive anxiety are combined with hyper-elevated levels of arousal that performance levels decrease dramatically. Anxiety. Anxiety is a negative emotional state that is characterized by or associated with feelings of nervousness, apprehension, or worry. There are two types of anxiety: state and trait. Trait and state anxiety. Trait anxiety is an aspect of personality and part of an individual's pattern of behavior. Some with a high level of trait anxiety are likely to become worried in a variety of situations, even non-threatening ones. State anxiety is a temporary, ever-changing mood state that is an emotional response to any considered threatening. For example, at the beginning of a rugby match, the player might have high levels of anxiety that will drop as soon as the match begins. State anxiety levels may increase again when coming up to a tackle and be at their highest level when being the tackler, which, if their position was correct, may result in a good tackle. The symptoms of anxiety. Cognitive anxiety refers to negative thoughts, nervousness, or worry experienced in certain situations. Symptoms of cognitive anxiety include concentration problems, fear, and bad decision making. Some anxiety relates to awareness and perception of physiological changes when you start to begin sport, such as increased heart rate and body temperature or sweatiness. For example, an athlete could be concerned because they sense an increase in the heart rate if they've gone into the game less prepared than usual. This increase in the heart rate is necessary for performance, but the athlete would perceive it as negative. The symptoms of increased somatic anxiety range from increased heart rate, respiratory rate, and sweating to complete muscle tension that prevents the athlete from moving, also known as freezing. So the factors affecting competitive anxiety are fear of making mistakes, fear of a crowd, fear of competition importance, fear of danger, lack of control, and type of task involved. Constantly worrying about an event can make you think that you are not good enough to succeed, which decreases self-confidence. This can make you feel that you are less likely to win. Heightened cognitive anxiety means that there is an increase in nervousness, apprehension, or worry. One of the things that athletes worry about is failure. Once you start to worry about it, you are focusing on it, which increases the likelihood of it happening. A heightened fear of failure could result in a negative physiological response like freezing or lack of movement coordination, which negatively affects the performance. Anxiety management. There are multiple ways to manage anxiety. Some are deep breathing, which is used to gain composure. Owen Farrell and other rugby kickers like Lee Halfpenny would do this before taking a conversion. Positive self-talk is to build up confidence, and athletes may do it before an event to give yourself belief. Visualization is seeing yourself being successful. Like deep breathing, Owen Farrell and other rugby kickers do this before taking a conversion. Practice. Every athlete does this to maintain skill levels or to improve them. Relaxation. It is needed to allow the body to rest and recover, which will let stores replenish. Focus on skill set. Similarly to the practice, focusing on the skill set allows you to perform better. A warm-up is essential to reduce the chances of injury. And selective attention, which allows you to focus on the important thing within a game or a match so you don't get easily distracted. However, disadvantage is that it can't be used in a live performance due to the rate at which it will be played. Stress. Lazarus and Folkman in 1984 defined stress as a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being which they may be unable to meet. Two terms have been introduced in sport to explain stress: eustress and distress. Eustress is a good form of stress that gives you a feeling of fulfillment. Some athletes actively seek out stress situations as they like the challenge of pushing themselves to the limit. This helps them increase their skill levels and focus their attention on aspects of the sport. The benefits is that there will be increases in intrinsic motivation. This might be making a big tackle in rugby, which will also increase arousal levels, then increasing performance. Distress is a bad form of stress and is normally what you mean when you discuss stress, is an extreme form of anxiety, nervousness, apprehension, or worry as a result of perceived inability to meet demands. An example of this could be an individual or most of the team constantly making mistakes throughout the game. Causes of stress. It is common to have lots of athletes in similar situations, yet with entirely different individual responses to those situations. Some of the main causes are, so you have internal, which are illness, psychological factors such as cognitive anxiety, not having enough sleep, or being overly self-critical or being a perfectionist. Externally, the environment, for example, it could be too noisy or quiet. Negative social interactions, for example, someone being rude, major life events, which could be a family tragedy, or day-to-day hassle, so travel to and from games or an event. Personal causes of stress come from who are significant in our lives, such as friends and family or a significant other. Lifestyle factors like health and finance can also be sources of stress. For example, if you become redundant from a job, you won't have a source of income, which can become stressful as you may have bills to pay and other things to buy. Occupational causes of stress are related to your job, for example, lack of satisfaction or unemployment. In a sporting situation, having a disagreement with a coach or manager and being dropped from the team could cause you to suffer from stress. Sporting environments. There are two key aspects of sport performance that cause stress: the importance of the event and uncertainty that surrounds the event. For example, stress levels would be increasingly high in a cup final rather than just a kickabout in football. Symptoms of stress. The general adaptation syndrome theory came around in 1956 by Selle. It is the most widely accepted theory that explains our body responds to stress. First off is the alarm reaction. Upon perceiving a stressor, the body reacts with a fight or flight response, which is the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated as the body's resources mobilize to meet the threat or danger. Next up is the resistance. The body resists and compensates as the parasympathetic nervous system attempts to return many physiological functions to normal levels, while the body focuses on resources against the stressor and remains on alert. Finally, exhaustion. If the stressor or stressors continue beyond the body's capacity, the resources become exhausted and the body is susceptible to disease and death. When you're in a situation you find threatening, your stress response is activated. The way you respond depends on how seriously you view that threat. The response is controlled by two parts of the nervous system: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Like I said before, the sympathetic nervous system is a response for the fight or flight response. It gives you the energy you need to comfort the threat or run away. Two factors for the fight or flight response are increased heart rate, and a dry mouth. Increased heart rate is quite beneficial, especially before most sports. This is because you require oxygenated blood cells at a high rate during exercise. Thereby having increased heart rate, it allows this to happen. However, in sports like darts or archery, where you need to be calm, this might not be very good as it becomes distracting and decline performance. A dry mouth is a disadvantage as when it comes to sport, as it can dehydrate you as you won't have any saliva to keep your mouth wet, which could also affect your breathing. Once stress has passed, the parasympathetic nervous system begins working. Two factors for this are decreases body temperatures and the muscles relax. A decrease in body temperature is useful to reduce stress, otherwise you can get